Alright guys, I'm here today with our first lecture of the year. Just to give you an idea of why we're doing it this way, as opposed to me doing it on the Google Classroom, is if I record myself reading the notes and describing the notes and going through them, you can stop and start to make sure you take notes, to make sure that you have everything you need. If you have to stop 10 minutes through because your little sister's being annoying, you can do that. You couldn't do that if we did it on a Google Meet. So all the lectures are going to come through these videos. And as you see on my screen here, all of them also come with a notes guide. These notes guides here, I'm asking you to find some words. They're going to ask you to still take some Cornell notes. And then in between here, there are some worksheets. So I know I'm going to just have to describe this to you on the Google meeting, but I'm saying it again so it's redundant. And so those people who have missed the Google meeting due to some circumstances they can't control are hearing it again. So just to reiterate, everything on this form is clickable and movable. You can kind of see I'm moving this up and around. So it's going to ask you to do stuff. The directions are down here. The one thing you don't do in the notes guide is hit present. If you hit present, you can't move anything, you can't fill anything out. Other than that, everything else is typable. Right, type here, I can type a bunch of letters. So everything's fill outable as long as it's highlighted to give you a clue, or if it's a drag and drop sheet like this, or questions. These are all things I expect you to fill out. This is what's going to be graded to know that that lets me know that you watched the notes. Take as much or as little notes as you want. I'm going to show you the website today in class. Go to my website, find the notes. If you need to cut and paste them because that makes you feel better, go ahead. There's no length or short or long that really matter to me as long as it shows me that you paid attention. If you only write one summary on the last slide and leave the rest of them blank and one question, go nuts. But just know you got to get it done if you want to get the fullest possible grade. Alright, with that being said, here we're going to go. So these notes are always available on the Google website, on the Google sites I have set up. You just got to know where to find them. They're also on the classroom site. And so you can always find the notes. Again, the notes guides are only on the Google Classroom, and they are the assignment. So make sure you have them. Make sure you're doing them. Make sure you're turning them in. All right, so let's present here. Where we're going to start this unit. So in order to talk about the U.S. Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s, we need to start all the way back, right before the Civil War, to kind of discuss where legal standing was, and where segregation comes from, and how long segregation is, what it looks like, what it means. All those good things, or not good things, need to be understood before we can even get into the meat and the heart of the Civil Rights Movement in the 1950s. So we start here with the legal standing of black Americans before the Civil War. And again, why slaves had no legal rights. None. It starts here with this case called Dred Scot versus Sanford. Dred Scot, being a slave from Missouri, which was a slave state, was picked up and moved by his owners into free states. I believe he helped out through the house, so as they moved to a different state and lived to make money, they took Dred Scot with them. His argument being that the minute he moved to a free state, everybody in that household was then jurisdiction of that state. So when he moved to Wisconsin, he was under the laws of Wisconsin. When he moved to Illinois, he was under the laws of Illinois. Both of those are free states. Because he now lived under the laws of a free state, he argued that he himself should be a free man. Let me move my face. So that was his argument. He went to the Supreme Court and said, I should be free because I lived in a free state, which sounds reasonable. It sounds legal, and we're going to see what happens. 3 quotes are going to come up. Again, Dred Scot lost his case 7-2. The Supreme Court Justice Taney, writes these 3 remarks. First, black people are not included and were not intended to be included under the word citizens in the Constitution, and therefore claim none of the rights and privileges which that instrument provides for and secures to the citizens of the United States. I mean, think about the words. Black people are not citizens. And to be a citizen means you get to vote, it means you have rights, it means you get to the court system, you have property rights. Everything afforded is not afforded to black people, according to the Supreme Court Justice. Second one, and if anything in relation to the Constitution can be regarded as settled, it is the word citizen and the word people. His point being that both of those words exist So the framers clearly had an intention to separate who was a citizen and who was people. And his argument is that African Americans are people and whites are citizens. And lastly, the framers thought blacks have no rights that the white man was bound to respect, and that the Negro might justly and lawfully reduced to slavery for his benefit. So again, reiterating the point, whites have power, whites have rights, and that is it. Any other race was not bound by the Constitution to have these same rights. So just to give you an idea, I'm going to ask you to use these couple quotes. There is a sheet in your Google Notes slide today that you should probably stop the slide and fill out now that you've heard them, you kind of understand them, and fill it out. How do you feel about those three quotes? How do they make you feel? What do you feel about them? And lastly, what's your argument? What's the other half of it? What's the dissenting or disagreeing opinion that you would say, why is this guy an idiot? So what does this mean? It means, first and foremost, that black Americans in the United States have no rights. Your label as free or slave was irrelevant. So a freed black man in the North had the same rights as a enslaved black man in the South. It did not matter your skin color defining your rights. So not only would the Dred Scot remain a slave, the court now decided that he had no legal rights to be seen before a court. Again, a huge success for the slave-owning South, and made the Civil War now necessary to change these rights. And it does. So real quick to talk about the Civil War. Some people will tell you the Civil War wasn't about slavery, and they may have some valid points that the slaves of the states of the South felt that they should have independent rights to make their own rules, and it's about state rights. But in the end, they were all fighting over slavery. For instance, if me and my brother were fighting over something, it's irrelevant that we're fighting if what we're fighting over is evil. So let's focus on what they're fighting over instead of who's fighting and why they're fighting. Again, they're fighting over slavery. So it is the tantamount purpose of the Civil War, and so we're going to see what happens. Civil War lasts from 1961 to 1965. In 1963, halfway through, January 1st, Abraham Lincoln, this man down here, decides that all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states are, and henceforth, shall be free. Why this is interesting is that it's rebellious states. So only states in the South that were part of the South had freed slaves. So he basically freed the slaves in countries he did not own. But the minute he won the Civil War and brought them back, it meant that they now had a rallying cry that slaves in the South were no longer going to be slaves. It was going to be illegal. With the Civil War still going on, it didn't have an immediate effect, but it now had a stated purpose of the war, right? If it wasn't about slavery, why does he have to proclaim that slavery is over? The celebration of Juneteenth, which we do celebrate in Milwaukee, is a celebration of this proclamation. What happened is that happened on January 1st, 1963. It took 2 years and a couple months, and by the time June 19th, 1965, that message of freedom had finally reached the farthest border of the United States, and Union soldiers finally got into Texas to free what you might want to say is the last of slavery was gone. So Juneteenth is a celebration of this proclamation, making it to the last spot in the country that hadn't heard it. End of the Civil War leads to these three amendments: the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment, referred to as the Civil War Amendment. So even though we were free and slavery was over, the promises now had to be guaranteed in the Constitution, so the Supreme Court could now and be forced to enforce them. Leads to the 13th Amendment states neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime, where the parties shall be duly shall exist within the United States. So basically, slavery is illegal in the United States. The only time it can, is the exemption down here, would be the arrest and conviction for those people that are in prison. So prison camps can still exist according to the 13th Amendment. The 14th Amendment: no state shall abridge or enforce any law, or shall abridge, which means take away, the privileges or immunity of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. So now they have inherently given people legal rights as a citizen, right? These are the same words of life, liberty, and property, which are in the Constitution. The due process of law in the Constitution. So everything you heard in Dred Scot is now overturned by this amendment. People have the right to go to court. People have the right to be a citizen. Right? We again overturn that idea that we talked about at the beginning of the slideshow. 15th, last one. The rights of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the U.S. on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. So again, all black males are now available and able to vote. Why aren't black women able to vote? Well, because no woman's able to vote at the time of this amendment. So again, this is what's going to give black males the right to vote. This leads to an area we call Reconstruction. It's just that. The attempt was for the North to rebuild the South with more equality. It led to a fight. The president, because again, Abraham Lincoln gets shot, assassinated. The guy who takes over, President Andrew Johnson, fights over Congress about this. President Johnson was kind of forced, felt that he needed to peacefully accept the South to get them back and working again and be a part of the Union. So he was willing to give in to some of their demands so that they would come back. Northern Republicans, on the other hand, which again is the same Republican Party you could vote for if you want to discover the history of the Republican Party, to know where it came from, when it changed, why it changed. I would suggest you do that. But when we talk about Republicans in slavery and the Civil War, it's a different kind of party than what we're talking about today. So these Northern Republicans wanted to see the South rebuilt with equity in mind, equality in mind, and destroy those that benefited from slavery. So these congressional Republicans won. They won the House, they won the presidency, and they won the Senate, and they now control all three in one and create all three forms of government and create whatever laws they want. They created radical Reconstruction policies that were designed to remove power from whites and allow black Southerners to participate. Two groups of people existed. There were the carpetbaggers. These were white Republicans that moved from the North into the South to become a voting bloc. There were the scallywags, which were the white Southerners who were also Republicans. So that means you lived in the South all your life, but you believed in equality. And then lastly, there were the black voters themselves. These three people got together and decided to start electing black representatives. So directly following the Civil War, the House of Representatives saw 14 black men elected to Congress. Again, black women couldn't run yet, but black men could, and they could hold office. You can go to your notes guide. You're going to see that there's some activities you should be doing today in regards to finding out more about the black men that served during Reconstruction. This finally ends. We look here, the Supreme Court stepped in. So again, that body of 9, which is unelected, existed prior to the Republican takeover. So they still were pro-slavery, just like they were during Dred Scott. They stepped in and started to override and call some of these Reconstruction policies in overreach. They started outlawing them. Several of the Reconstruction laws that were passed outlawed segregation and required equal access. These protections were removed by the Supreme Court. Northern Republicans also became more conservative. They kind of flattened out, as tends to be the case over the long time, and some of them no longer supported having a military presence in the South to help enforce some of these laws. So even laws that stayed on the books had no enforcement, so nobody followed them. This left the South wide open, and through passing laws, which we'll discuss later, such as the Black Codes, instituting what are called Jim Crow laws, and the rise of groups such as the Ku Klux Klan, the white Southerners finally being able to institute policies of segregation. To go from slavery to now legalized segregation. And so the remainder of the unit is going to be looking at what are those policies of segregation, how are they passed, what are they called, how do people start to fight against them, and going from there.